Experience the kinetic glow of a life in constant motion, where every choice creates a ripple that changes the world forever. Our 3D visuals capture the energy and the passion of those who lived every second to the absolute fullest. Subscribe today and feel the power of motion.
The kettle was just starting to whistle when my phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. I almost didn't pick it up. I had a routine on Sunday mornings, and that routine involved my old blue mug, 2 slices of sourdough toast, and absolutely nobody bothering me before 9. But something made me look. Maybe it was the way the buzzing seemed to go on a beat too long. Maybe it was instinct. After 67 years on this earth, you learn to listen to the small voice that says, "Pick up the phone." It was a text from my granddaughter. Just 3 words. "Grandma, Daddy fell." I stood there in my robe with the kettle screaming behind me, and I read those 3 words 4 times before my hands started to work again. Her name is Penelope, but she goes by Poppy, and she's 9 years old. 9-year-olds don't text their grandmothers at 7:30 on a Sunday morning. Not unless something is very, very wrong. I called her right back. It rang once, twice. Then a small voice answered, and I could hear she'd been crying. "Grandma, I'm here, baby. I'm here. Baby, I'm here. Tell me what happened. Daddy fell down in the kitchen and he won't get up. There's a lot of blood. Mommy's not home. I want you to understand something. My son, Theo, we've always called him Theo, is 41 years old. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon at one of the best hospitals in the Pacific Northwest. He runs marathons. He doesn't fall down in his kitchen. And his wife, my daughter-in-law, was supposed to be at home that morning because they had a family brunch planned that very afternoon. I knew because I'd talked to Theo on Friday and he'd told me himself. "Sweetheart, listen to me very carefully. I need you to hang up and call 911 right now. Tell them your address. Tell them your daddy is hurt, then call me back. Can you do that?" She did. That little 9-year-old girl, all by herself, called the ambulance for her own father. When she called me back, she was sitting on the floor next to him with a dish towel pressed to his head. She told me later she'd seen it on a TV show. I live in Charleston. Theo and his family live outside Portland, Oregon. That's about a 5-hour flight, not counting the drive to the airport and the layover in Dallas. By the time I'd thrown clothes into a bag and gotten myself to the curb, I was already on the phone with the airline begging for a seat on the next flight out. I paid $1,100 for a one-way ticket I didn't bother reading the terms of. I would have paid 10 times that. Here's the part I keep going back to in my mind, the thing that didn't sit right from the very first phone call. Where was she? My daughter-in-law. Where was the mother of that child who had to call her grandmother for help on a Sunday morning? I tried calling her on the way to the airport, straight to voicemail. I tried again at the gate. Voicemail. I tried from my seat before they made me put the phone away. Voicemail. I told myself 100 different stories on that flight. Maybe she was at the gym and her phone was in a locker. Maybe she'd run out for coffee. Maybe she was already at the hospital and had her phone on silent. I tried very hard to believe those stories. I'm a mother. I wanted to believe the best of the woman my son had married. I really did. When I landed in Portland, I had 11 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The first voicemail was from a social worker at Oregon Health and Science University. My son was in the ICU. My granddaughter was with hospital staff. Nobody had been able to reach her mother. I took an Uber straight to the hospital. The driver, bless him, didn't say a word the whole way, just kept handing me tissues from a little box he had in the console. I must have been a sight. Poppy was sitting in the waiting room with a woman in a cardigan who introduced herself as a child life specialist. My granddaughter still had blood on her pajama pants. She had a juice box in one hand and her father's wallet in the other. When she saw me, she didn't run. She didn't cry. She just stood up very carefully like she was made of glass, and she walked over and put her face into my stomach and stood there. I held her for I don't know how long. The cardigan woman explained things in a low voice over the top of her head. Theo had collapsed in the kitchen. He had hit his head on the corner of the granite island when he went down. The bleeding was bad, but the bitter problem was what had caused him to collapse in the first place. They were running tests. They didn't know yet. He was unconscious. He was in critical condition. They had been trying to reach his wife since 7:45 that morning, It was now after 4 in the afternoon. And nothing, I said? Nothing at all? The social worker shook her head. We've called every number on file. Her work, her cell, her sister in Minnesota. The sister hasn't heard from her in over a week. I knelt down so I could look Poppy in the eye. Honey, do you know where Mommy went? She nodded. Where, sweetheart? On a trip with Aunt Marisol. She left Friday after she dropped me at school. I had never in my life heard the name Marisol. Not from my son, not from my daughter-in-law, not at any of the holidays, not in any of the photos on her social media, not at the wedding I'd helped pay for 11 years ago. I asked Poppy if she could show me on her dad's phone. She could. She knew his passcode because she used his phone to play games. That little girl scrolled through her father's text messages with the calm expertise of someone who had clearly done this before, and she found a thread between her parents from Thursday night. It was an itinerary, a confirmation email her mother had forwarded to my son, a wellness retreat at a private resort in Tulum, Mexico. 6 nights, 2 adult guests. The booking was in her name and somebody named Quentin Holloway. The total was just under $19,000. I sat in that waiting room and I read that email twice, and I felt something go cold inside my chest. Not hot, cold. There's a particular kind of stillness that comes over a mother when somebody hurts her child. I don't have words for it. You either know it or you don't. The thing my daughter-in-law didn't know, the thing she had probably never bothered to find out, because she had never bothered to ask me a single real question in 11 years of marriage, is that I am not a sweet old lady from Charleston who knits and bakes and sends birthday cards. I mean, I do those things. But before I retired, I spent 31 years in trust and estate law. I know my way around a financial document the way a chef knows their way around a knife. And I knew because Theo had asked me to look it over 2 years ago exactly how my son's accounts were structured. When Theo and his wife bought the house, they took out the mortgage in his name only because her credit was a mess from before they got married. The investment accounts, the brokerage, the savings. All of it was set up with him as primary and her as authorized user, not joint owner. The retirement accounts were his alone. There was a joint checking account they used for household expenses, but everything else funded into that account from his side. More importantly, 2 years ago, when Theo had started to have some quiet concerns about his marriage that he'd never quite put into words, he'd asked me to help him set up a revocable living trust. He hadn't moved everything into it yet, but he had given me, his mother, durable power of attorney over financial matters in the event he was incapacitated. I had the paperwork in a fireproof box at home in Charleston. I also had scans of every page in an encrypted folder on my phone, because that is the kind of woman I am. I sat there in that hospital waiting room with my granddaughter half asleep against my hip, and I made a list on the back of an envelope I found in my purse. I am a list maker. It steadies me. First, I needed to make sure Theo got the best care possible. That meant being physically present and being the named decision maker until he could make decisions for himself. Second, I needed to make sure Poppy was safe and stable. She needed her clothes, her toothbrush, her stuffed bear. She needed to sleep somewhere that wasn't a hospital chair. Third, I needed to find out exactly what my daughter-in-law had been doing for the last several months, because a $19,000 trip with a man nobody had ever heard of doesn't come out of nowhere. There's always a trail. Fourth, I needed to protect every single dollar of my son's money before she came home and tried to spend any more of it. I started with the hospital. I produced the power of attorney paperwork from my phone and emailed it to the social worker, who emailed it to the legal department, who confirmed within an hour that I was the authorized decision maker for my son's medical care. The neurosurgeon came down to talk to me. Theo had suffered what they called a vasovagal syncope episode, probably stress-induced, and the head injury from the fall had caused a subdural hematoma. They were going to operate that night to relieve the pressure. The prognosis was cautiously optimistic. He was strong, he was healthy, but the next 24 hours were critical. I signed the consent forms with a hand that did not shake. I had cried already on the plane and in the Uber, and I had decided I was done crying for now. There would be time for that later. I called my best friend back home, a woman I have known since we were 20 years old, and I asked her to go to my house, find the fireproof box, and overnight the contents to me. She didn't ask questions. She said, of course, sugar, and she hung up. Then I took Poppy to the hospital cafeteria and bought her a grilled cheese and a chocolate milk, and I asked her, very gently, if she could tell me what things had been like at home lately. What that 9-year-old told me over a paper plate of French fries is something I am not going to repeat in detail, because it is her story to tell when she's grown. But I will tell you this. Her mother had been gone a lot. Her mother had been on the phone a lot, in rooms with the doors closed. Her mother had been buying things, clothes, jewelry, a new car that Daddy didn't know about because it was kept at a friend's house. Her mother had told her, more than once, that if Daddy and Mommy ever got divorced, Poppy would have to choose, and Poppy needed to remember who really loved her. A 9-year-old, told that, by her own mother. Poppy ate her French fries one at a time, and she watched me carefully while she told me, like she was waiting to see if I was going to be angry at her for saying it. "Sweetheart," I said, "none of this is your fault. None of it. You are the bravest, smartest girl I have ever known, and I am so proud of you for telling me. You are not going to have to choose anything. Do you hear me?" She nodded. Then she said, "Grandma, I don't want her to come home." I will carry that sentence with me for the rest of my life. By Sunday night, Theo was out of surgery and stable. The neurosurgeon was pleased. He would be in a medically induced state for at least 24 more hours so the brain could rest. I sat by his bed and held his hand, and I told him quietly, where nobody could hear me, that I was going to take care of everything, that he didn't have to worry about anything, that his job right now was to wake up. Then I went out into the hallway and I started making phone calls. I called the bank where Theo's primary brokerage account was held. I had been added as a trusted contact 2 years ago, and with the power of attorney now on file with the hospital and a notarized copy on the way, I was able to initiate a hold on all outgoing transactions. The representative was very kind. She'd been doing this job for 22 years, she told me, and she'd seen every kind of family situation there was. She walked me through it step by step. I called the credit union where the joint checking account was held, and I requested an immediate review of authorized users. I couldn't remove my daughter-in-law from a joint account without Theo's signature, but I could flag the account for fraud monitoring and request that no withdrawals over $500 be processed without verbal confirmation from the primary account holder. Theo, of course, was not in a position to provide verbal confirmation of anything. I called the credit card companies. There were 4 cards in Theo's name. I reported them as potentially compromised and requested they be frozen pending review. There would be no more luxury hotel charges on his American Express, no more first-class flights on his Visa, no more spa treatments on the card she had been authorized to use for household needs. I called the country club where they had a family membership and had the billing flagged. I called the leasing company for that secret car Poppy had told me about. Bless that child for knowing the friend's name where it was kept. And I had a very interesting conversation that revealed it was leased to my daughter-in-law's name, but with Theo as the co-signer and the payments coming out of his account. I couldn't do anything about that one yet, but I made a note. By midnight, my daughter-in-law's access to my son's money had been quietly, methodically, completely cut off. She just didn't know it yet. I took Poppy to a hotel near the hospital. She slept curled up against my back like she had when she was 3 years old and used to come stay with me for weekends. I lay awake most of the night listening to her breathe. The first call from my daughter-in-law came at 4:17 in the morning Pacific time. She'd tried to charge a dinner to the Visa and it had been declined. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came at 4:30. I let that one go too. By 6 in the morning, she had called 11 times. I listened to a few of the voicemails. They started confused, then irritated, then panicked. The card had been declined again. The hotel was holding her bags. There must be some mistake. Could I please call her back? She'd been trying to reach Theo, and he wasn't answering either. Was something wrong? She had been at a luxury resort in Mexico for 2.5 days, and she had not once successfully reached her husband, and it had not occurred to her to be alarmed about that fact until her credit card stopped working. I made coffee in the little hotel pot. I checked on Poppy, who was still sleeping. I sat by the window and watched the sun come up over Portland. And then, at 7 a.m. exactly, I picked up the phone and I called her back. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was sharp and high, the way it gets when she's about to lose her temper but is trying not to. "Where have you been? I've been calling all night. There's something wrong with our cards. I can't pay for anything and I can't reach Theo, and Theo is in the hospital." There was a pause. Just a tiny one, less than a second. But I heard it. "What? What do you mean the hospital? What happened?" "He collapsed yesterday morning in the kitchen. He hit his head. He had emergency brain surgery last night. He's stable, but he's still unconscious." Another pause. Longer this time. "Oh my God. Oh my God. I have to come home. I have to. Where's Poppy? Is Poppy okay?" "Poppy is with me. She called me yesterday morning when she found her father on the kitchen floor. She is the one who called the ambulance. She is 9 years old and she did all of that by herself because her mother was not home and would not answer her phone." I said it very calmly. I did not raise my voice. I have found over the course of a long life that calm is much sharper than rage when you want a thing to land. She started to cry, or she started to make crying sounds. I have known this woman for 11 years, and I am not certain I have ever seen her actually cry, so I cannot say for sure. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know. I had my phone on Do Not Disturb. The retreat has a rule about stop." She stopped. "I am not interested in the rule. I am not interested in the retreat. I am not interested in Quentin Holloway. We can discuss all of that later. Right now, I need you to listen to me very carefully because this is going to be the most important conversation of your entire life." "What? How do you know?" I said, "Listen." She listened. "Your husband is in the ICU. He is going to recover. When he does, he is going to have to decide what kind of life he wants to live going forward. I am not going to make that decision for him. But I am going to make sure that when he is well enough to make it, he is in a position to actually have choices. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? I don't. The accounts are frozen. The cards are frozen. The credit lines are frozen. I have power of attorney over your husband's finances, and I have exercised it. You will not be able to charge another dinner, book another flight, or withdraw another dollar from anything connected to his name until he is conscious and able to make his own decisions about what he wants to do. You can't do that. I have done it. It is done. Call any lawyer you like and they will tell you the same thing. I am his wife. You are. And what kind of wife you have been is something he is going to have to think about when he wakes up. In the meantime, you are going to need to figure out how to get yourself home from Mexico because his credit card is no longer paying for your hotel." She started saying a great many things very fast, some of them in tears, some of them in rage. She told me I was a controlling old witch. She told me I had always hated her. She told me I would regret this. She told me Theo would never forgive me. She told me she was going to call the police. She told me she was going to call her own lawyer. She told me she loved my son, and this was all a misunderstanding, and I had no right to do this to her. I waited until she ran out of breath. "One more thing," I said. "Your daughter is staying with me. She does not want to see you when you get back, and given the circumstances, I am not going to force her to. If you attempt to come to the hospital while I am here with her, I will have you removed by security. We can sort out custody arrangements through proper channels when your husband is awake. Until then, you stay away from my granddaughter. Are we clear?" She was screaming by the end. I hung up. I want to tell you the rest happened cleanly and quickly, but it didn't. Real life never does. Theo woke up Tuesday afternoon. He didn't remember falling. He didn't remember much of the week before, actually, which the doctor said was normal and would probably come back in pieces. The first thing he asked for was his daughter. The second thing he asked for was his wife. I had to tell him. I'm not going to write down what my son's face looked like when I told him where his wife had been when he hit his head. Some things belong only to the people who lived them. What I will tell you is that he asked me that same afternoon to keep the accounts frozen. He asked me to call his lawyer. He asked me to bring Poppy to him because he needed to hold her. He cried and I cried, and Poppy climbed into the hospital bed with him, and the three of us stayed like that for a long time. His wife came home from Mexico 3 days later. Quentin Holloway, it turned out, was a personal trainer she had met at the gym about 14 months prior. He was 29 years old. He had no idea she was married. When she told him on the flight home that she was, he made it very clear that he wanted nothing further to do with her. That part I learned later. I don't know how my son found it out. I didn't ask. The divorce took 8 months. It was not pretty. She fought hard for the house and for primary custody of Poppy. She did not get either. The forensic accountant my son hired turned up almost $200,000 in undisclosed spending over the previous 3 years. There were 3 more credit cards she had opened in his name without his knowledge. There was a small storage unit full of designer handbags. There was a boat she had put a deposit on. The judge was not impressed. Poppy lives with her father full-time now, with supervised visits with her mother every other weekend. She is doing well. She is in 4th grade. She is on a swim team. She still texts me every Sunday morning, but now it's just to tell me what she had for breakfast. Theo made a full recovery. He went back to work after 3 months. He's dating a kind woman who is a pediatric nurse at the same hospital, and Poppy adores her, and I am cautiously optimistic, but I am keeping my mouth shut and letting things unfold the way they need to unfold. I moved to Portland 6 months ago into a little house 10 minutes from theirs. I babysit on Tuesday nights, so Theo can have a date or just an evening to himself. Poppy has her own room at my house. She picked the paint color. It's a kind of soft sea glass green. Sometimes I think about that Sunday morning, the tea kettle, the blue mug, the buzz of the phone against the counter, the 3 words from a frightened child, alone in a kitchen with her father, calling the only adult she trusted to know what to do. I think about what would have happened if I had let that call go to voicemail. I think about what would have happened if I hadn't gotten on a plane that same day. I think about what would have happened if I hadn't, 2 years prior, said yes when my son asked me to be his power of attorney, even though I'd hoped I would never need to use it. People ask me sometimes, friends from back home, how I knew what to do. They tell me I was so brave, so quick, so smart. I always tell them the same thing. I wasn't brave. I was a mother. There is a difference. When somebody hurts your child, you don't decide what to do. You just do it. Your hands do the work, and your heart catches up later. And if you have spent your whole life making sure you are the kind of woman who can be relied upon in a crisis, who knows where the documents are? Who has the phone numbers written down? Who has paid attention to the things nobody else thought were worth paying attention to? Well then, when the crisis comes, you are ready. Take care of your families. Pay attention to your children and your grandchildren and your gut. Listen when the small voice tells you to pick up the phone. And if anybody ever tries to tell you that a sweet old lady from the South can't move mountains in 24 hours, you send them my way. I'll set them straight. I have thought about that Sunday morning more times than I can count, and every time I come back to the same quiet truth. Nothing in my life happened by accident. Not the law degree I earned in night school while Theo was a baby napping in a playpen beside my desk. Not the 31 years I spent learning how trusts and powers of attorney really work. Not the conversation I had with my son 2 years before he hit his head on that granite island, when something in his voice told me to ask the question, and I asked it, and he answered, and we made the arrangements just in case. Every choice I made over decades was a small seed, and on that one terrible morning, all of those seeds bloomed at once. That is what I want anyone watching this to understand. The woman who saved her son in 24 hours did not invent herself in 24 hours. She had been preparing, without knowing she was preparing, her entire adult life. This is the part that matters. The part I would say to my younger self if I could reach back through the years and shake her by the shoulders. Build the kind of character that can be relied upon before anyone is asking you to be relied upon. Learn the things that nobody thinks are interesting. Read the documents. Ask the boring questions. Pay attention to the people you love when they are not in crisis, so that when the crisis comes, you already know what they need. Theo's wife thought she was being clever. She thought a sweet old woman from Charleston was a problem she would never have to face. She made her choices, and her choices made her future. That is the only law I have ever truly believed in. What you do quietly, in the dark, in rooms with the doors closed, becomes the architecture of your life. You cannot outrun it. You cannot charm it away. It comes for you with the patience of a tide. But I want to say something gentler too, because I am not a hard woman, even after everything. The thing that saved my son was not my anger. My anger was useful, but it was not the foundation. The foundation was the years of love I had quietly poured into being his mother. The fact that I picked up the phone when a frightened 9-year-old called. The fact that I had taught Poppy without ever knowing I was teaching her. That her grandmother was someone she could count on. Decency, intelligence, and the steady refusal to give up. Those 3 things, woven together over the course of a long life, are stronger than any betrayal that can be done to you or to the people you love. I am 67 years old, and I have learned that you cannot always prevent the storm, but you can be the kind of person who has built a strong house, who has a flashlight in every drawer, who knows where the candles are, and when the wind comes, you stand. You stand for the ones who cannot yet stand for themselves. That is all of it. That is the whole thing.